I'm sorry I'm a little late to starting this stream, but there's a good reason for it. And that reason is that I couldn't get the YouTube to start properly on my laptop. I'm in my hotel room right now and it just wasn't really working very well. I think it's because I might have logged on through Safari, but I'm not 100% sure on that. Maybe I just needed to do Google Chrome. So, yeah, so hey, Cindy, long time no see. Hi, Elizabeth. I'm in my hotel now. It was kind of a long day. It was busy for a short time, and here I am. I'm kind of wondering what everybody thinks of what happened today. I've been asking around a lot about this whole standing silent. I've seen people in the past stand mute or what have you. And basically, you can't just not, you can do that, I guess, but then the judge says, okay, you're pleading not guilty because this is part of the process. Even pleading not guilty, it's part of the process. So you have rights. Your attorney has the right to receive all the evidence the prosecution intends to use against you at trial and to evaluate the strength of the state's case. And so today, Bryan Kohberger and his attorney stood silent. That means the judge entered, entered the not guilty pleas on his behalf, on Bryan Kohberger's behalf. So I found it to be, fairly interesting. I was sitting in the courtroom and I was worried about getting a seat. I feel like this is the third trial in recent memory, and this was not the trial, obviously, this was an arraignment, but the third case in recent memory where I had to worry about getting a spot in the courtroom. Obviously, this started with Johnny Depp. I had to get a spot in the courtroom for that. Some days I did, some days I didn't. For the Murdoch trial, also, there was an issue with that, with sitting in line and getting a spot. And now this. Thank goodness I got into the courtroom. I arrived at the courthouse 2 hours and 20 minutes before the arraignment started, and we were able to get a spot. I was able to get a spot. I was in the back of the courtroom, and it was a little hard to hear. I mean, I could hear, but it was a little difficult. I got the trial date wrong. I said October 22nd. That's what I thought it sounded like, but apparently they said October 2nd. I put out a correction of sorts, a clarification tweet. And then, so I'm going to start at the beginning on what happened. I tweeted all of this out, but I'll just start from the beginning. So we get in there. I was on the left side of the courtroom behind Kohberger's side. There was a front row up front of the other side of the courtroom where the prosecution's side of the courtroom was. And it looked like, maybe the first row possibly was a couple of media members. I don't know. But in the second row, Maddie Mogen's mother was sitting there. And I had seen her once before, and she looks very much like an older version of her daughter, Maddie. And it appeared she was there with her husband. And then Maddie's father was sitting behind her in the third row. And so there were a lot of people there I didn't recognize. Some of the family members watched via Zoom. You have to keep in mind, Ethan Chapin's parents live in Washington State. And then Xana Kernodle's father lives in Arizona. And her mother, from what I understand, lives in the Coeur d'Alene area of Idaho. If she was there, I didn't see her. And so it was packed over there. It was packed, and there were court representatives kind of blocking the benches a little bit. I'm assuming that's because they didn't want anybody approaching them. Members of the media kind of were filed in as they got through security and told where to sit, or, hey, here's a seat here, or what have you. And so I just sat down with some other people. I think I was in the second to the last row. So I feel like I just made the cut to get into the courtroom. And, I just watched. And One thing I noticed at the initial appearance in January, Christy Gonsalves seemed a little bit more emotional, just some tearing up and stuff like that, understandably so. I don't know how these families hold it together when they have to go to court. I kind of try to put myself in their shoes and wonder if I would have that strength to go there and just, sit, as I'm being told the person on the other side of the courtroom killed my daughter or my brother or my sister or what have you. So I saw that she seemed to have a little, she wasn't as emotional, and she walked up to the front of the courtroom, and Maddie Mogen's sister was there. Or I'm sorry, Maddie Mogen's mother was there. Pardon me, I just said that. Sorry, it's been a long day. And she kind of went up to her, and she kind of just put her arm around her like this. And it was just a very sweet gesture, comforting her. And then she went back and sat with her husband, Steve. Kaylee's sister, her older sister, who recently had a baby, was there with the baby. Sweet little baby making cute little gurgly baby sounds. And it was just, really sad to sit there and watch them sit there. Obviously, Kaylee's sister wants to be there to represent her sister. And she's sitting there with this newborn little baby that Kaylee, should be able to sit there and snuggle with. And she can't, because she was horrifically murdered. So I think I said this last night on the live when I came on, and I do believe this, and I've thought a lot about it. And this is just me talking. Nobody's told me anything, and but when you go to the apartment building next door, in that driveway that goes up, and you go around a park, that you can see right inside what would have been Maddie's bedroom window. And her pink boots were there for a really long time. They're no longer there. And also an M, a block letter M. And I have the video of it and the photo of it somewhere. It's in my phone. I have tons of videos in my phone that I take and never post. So I really think that it's quite possible that she could have, somebody could have been possibly peeping on her from that vantage point. This is my theory, because if that blind was open, the Venetian blinds had been opened, you could see straight into that bedroom. And there's an M, and there's the pink cowboy boots in the window. And, whomever did this, whether it's Bryan Kohberger or somebody else, and the state says it's Bryan Kohberger, that person went to that bedroom. That was the first stop, according to everything we know from the probable cause affidavit. And Kaylee had moved out. Her room was across the hall. So I said this last night on the live. I think that Maddie was the main target. And, Ethan and Xana, sadly, and Kaylee, because Kaylee wasn't even really supposed to be there. She decided to go down. Sadly, they were doing nothing wrong. I mean, they were just there doing what college kids do, sleeping in their house. And sadly, their lives were taken for no other reason other than they were there. And that's my personal theory on it. So I kind of wondered if that's why, I wonder if the families are learning more about the theory of the case and the details. And, Christy Gonsalves walks up to Maddie's mother to kind of comfort her. And you can tell that this is having a really detrimental effect on her mom. I could just tell in her face. She looks tired. She looks forlorn. And I feel for her and every one of them. So that happened. And then, this was all very organized. I give kudos to the court for how organized it was. The family members were brought in after us. The press is brought in. And at the very last minute, I'm talking the very last minute, and you can see it on video, Ann Taylor, Bryan Kohberger's lawyer, comes in with him and another gentleman, and they sit at the table. They barely sit down, and then all rise, and here's Judge up on the bench. Some people pointed this out to me, and I went back and watched it, and I'm not going to lie to you guys. I was busy all day, so I didn't have a chance to go back and actually watch the video of the arraignment until just the last half hour or so. And you do see like some movement, when Maddie's name is brought up in the murder count, some different body movement versus what happens with the other people, the other victims' names when they're read. When Kaylee's name is read, Ethan, Xana, you notice he kind of wiggles a little bit and face moves. Maybe he's just having a bad reaction to his breakfast. I don't know. But definitely a different reaction. So yeah, it was interesting to watch. He was very forceful and very kind of, I don't know if confidence the right word. That's the word I used in my tweet, but yes, do you understand your rights? Yes. And maybe this is just the way he is. We've seen him in body camera footage from traffic stops, but he clearly understands his rights. He understands the charges. He understands the penalties. There's no issue or belief that this guy doesn't understand the process. He was getting a PhD in criminology. So I thought it was interesting, and I wonder if this was Bryan Kohberger's wish to have a speedy trial, but Ann Taylor, his attorney, asked for a trial date just outside of the speedy trial time limits. So that will be on October 2nd if this case indeed goes to trial. This prosecution still has 60 days to decide and notify the defense about whether or not they will pursue the death penalty in this case. But, as of now, trial in October. And part of me is like, okay, what's the strategy there? I kind of said this on the air today. Is it kind of okay, you guys have the goods, you can get this case together? I hear defense attorneys often tell me, with big cases like this, that they would just love to demand a speedy trial because they think the state can't get it together in time and isn't ready. And this is what some defense attorneys have told me. And they believe they can't pull it all together in time and present something cohesive to actually win a conviction. I don't know if that's the case here. There's a gag order that I've talked about before that I think is way too restrictive. And it would be great to know the defense strategy. And I need to ask some defense attorneys this, because that's part of what I think. Like, maybe Bryan Kohberger wants a speedy trial, and this is right outside the time limits. Maybe there's some scheduling issues, and maybe he's just like, you tell them to do this, and, I demand a speedy trial. I didn't do this, or what have you. This is also a case where there were a lot of cooks in the kitchen. The Moscow Police Department, not used to handling something like this. A lot of police departments are not used to handling something like this, even if they're a big department, a quadruple homicide, something like this. It would be daunting for even a big city police department to handle. So there are a lot of people working on this, a lot of different agencies. There's a lot of material to look at and go through. And I'll be interested to see, how it all comes together. Obviously, the possibility of a plea bargain is always on the table. Those discussions always happen. Sometimes the defense initiates them, sometimes the state does, what have you. But yeah, there you have it. So, this was not some big eventful hearing where we were going to learn all kinds of information, but it was just interesting because I see no difference in Bryan Kohberger. People I heard online were saying stuff like, oh, he's so much thinner, he's skinnier. I did not notice that. Maybe I need to look at the video again. Again, I was behind him. All I could see was the back of his head. So I wasn't seeing much. But yeah, it was, it's very sad. This whole thing is really, really sad. Okay, Larissa, truth seeker. Will his trial take place in the same courtroom and have more cameras? Good question. I would assume that the trial will take place in this courtroom. It is judges. It's kind of funny to me. Is it judge or judge? Judge. It's like, how do you say it? Like, I'd love to, if it wasn't so serious, such a serious case, I'd love to know. It's like, where do we put the emphasis in this name? Judge. I don't know. So this was his courtroom that we were in today, and it seems to be for that old of a courthouse of that age, it seems to be a fairly large courtroom. And so I assume it will be in that courtroom if they go to trial, unless they determine they can't impanel a fair and impartial jury there, and then the trial would be moved. Would it be moved to somewhere like Boise? I don't know. That's Ada County, where they just had the Lori Vallow Daybell case. Getting a jury is going to be difficult wherever they go, but it's not impossible. I mean, people think everybody's sitting around watching the news and YouTube all day, and that's not always the case. So we hope the cameras will be allowed should there be a trial. We've had cameras up until this point in these pretrial hearings. There have only been 2. Let's hope that Judge is maybe open-minded to that and sees the magnitude of this case and the fact that there is great public interest in it, and hopefully he will allow that. So we're hoping to learn more about that on June 9th when there's a hearing regarding the gag order issue and then the issue of cameras in the courtroom, because of course we all want cameras in the courtroom, all the media. Live streaming will probably be a whole nother question. Thus far, they haven't allowed it. All right, Kathy Ward, just jumping in. Sorry if you answered. Was anyone there for Bryan? No. Nobody was there physically in the courtroom for Bryan Kohberger that we are aware of. They live in Pennsylvania. His family does. So it's our understanding that they watched via Zoom. And a Zoom link was made available to the family members. It was a private Zoom link to the families who either couldn't travel or maybe didn't want to travel for something that was going to be so brief. You have to keep in mind, Ethan Chapin's parents live in Washington State. Xana Kernodle's father lives in Arizona. And then her mother lives in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And I've seen her on television. I've never spoken to her, but she appears to have some issues with addiction and whatnot, which is very sad. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention, guys. So Judge had a little bit of a problem with the names of the victims. He called Kaylee, which was a little surprising to me, Kayla. And I looked at the indictment. It clearly says Kaylee to me. Maybe he was nervous. Maybe he didn't have his contacts in properly. I don't know. But he called her Kayla. That was very upsetting to Kaylee's older sister. She literally said to one of the court representatives afterward that, she brought it up to a representative of the court that he got the names wrong. He misstated the names, and the court representative responded in some fashion I couldn't hear. And then she said, it's disrespectful. And she said, it's important. It's important to get the names right. He also couldn't say Xana Kernodle's name. Like, he had trouble getting that name out. So some people took issue with that. Let's see. I'm looking through to see if there are other questions. Yeah, people have talked about that, Rob, about the body language between Bryan Kohberger and Dan Taylor. I mean, it was kind of like that during the first hearing too, just she's here, she comes in, I don't want to sound I don't want to sound tacky or anything, but she has amazingly blonde hair. Like, it's very pretty. I mean, the color is very vibrant and stuff, but she comes in and she sits there at counsel table and sits next to him. He kind of looks over and kind of one of these, like just very briefly. But sure, I mean, we do not see any type of warmth in between these two. And who knows what their interactions have been like. We don't know what their interactions have been like. They could possibly not get along. He doesn't have much of a choice, right? He's got a public defender, appointed counsel. This is the best he's going to do. And she's a death penalty qualified attorney. He's got a good lawyer should he, face the death penalty in this case, or the potential of the death penalty. So, I mean, let's face it, beggars can't be choosers. He doesn't have the means to pay for his own attorney. And honestly, his parents, I've heard they had some financial issues here and there. They certainly should not be expected to sell the farm to pay for his defense. He's an adult. He's 28 years old. So he's innocent until proven guilty, of course, in a court of law. But, this is what he's getting. And he'll get, he'll get decent attorneys. The state's paying for it. And if it's a death penalty case, he'll have to probably have more attorneys and plus mitigation experts. I'm sure he has investigators working on the case and whatnot. Okay. Elizabeth says, also on that Dateline episode of that Maddie on the show has descriptions of this Maddie here. I was like, wow, okay. I don't recall what you're talking about. I watched Dateline, but I kept having to rewind and fast forward. That happens sometimes when you have a little one running around the house who, is taking up your time of a child, So I kept rewinding and fast forwarding back, and I may have to go back and watch again. I'm going to tell you, there were some interesting nuggets woven into that Dateline episode. What I thought was interesting, and I don't know what you're talking about, Elizabeth. I'm going to have to go back and look. I thought it was very interesting that they reported, and all of their reporting was according to sources, of course, sources or a source, because there's a gag order. So they can't do anything but get stuff from a source or sources. It must be a pretty rock solid source for NBC to put their necks out there and say, okay, we can go with this with an unnamed source. But Keith Morrison said, when Bryan Kohberger arrived home in Pennsylvania, and this is around the time I think that he was under surveillance by the FBI and other agencies, they said that Bryan Kohberger's sister, according to their source, questioned why he was in the house wearing latex gloves. And that was, I thought, in the probable cause affidavit, that he was being followed and wearing gloves. And she said, apparently to family members, he's wearing these latex gloves, plastic gloves. What's he doing? And he's got a white Elantra. Did he kill these kids in Idaho? And I was like, whoa, if that happened, wow. And I wondered if, while they were surveilling the house, whether or not the cops actually heard this conversation. I don't know. I don't know if they were able to get that type of warrant to listen in on conversations and things like that. But I thought that was a pretty interesting piece of information. Oh, okay. Elizabeth, yes. Somebody mentioned that to me. I think that I must have missed that part of the Dateline. I'm going to have to go back and watch because somebody mentioned this to me, a Maddie at DeSales. I'm sorry, I just must have missed that part of the episode. That sounds a little too I don't know. That sounds a little too hokey and hinky to me, but I could be totally wrong. I mean, I'm not questioning Dateline's reporting, but if that's how they're framing it, or if that's how it's being framed, that would be really weird. You're gonna stare at some girl in class named Maddie who's blonde and pretty, and then go across the country and go to college and get a PhD, or start your PhD work and then set out to murder somebody named Maddie who's blonde. It sounds like a little too out there for me, but I'm sure stranger things have happened. Let's see. Let's see. Looking to see if there are any other questions. I'm trying to remember if I'm trying to think if I left anything out. Let me look at my tweets from today to see if I forgot anything. So if Ann Taylor thinks it's going to be a 6-week trial, she's speaking right now as, and it's funny because she's saying, we believe it's going to be a 6-week trial. So she's probably talked with Bill Thompson about this, I would assume. And this is without the death penalty being on the table. Death penalty is on the table. Guess what? That 6-week trial probably turns into an 8-week trial. And 6 weeks, my goodness. I mean, I don't know what the state is planning to present, but 6 weeks, really? I mean, that includes jury selection. So I'm wondering if she thinks it's going to be a 6-week trial of like testimony, closing, opening statements, jury selection, opening statements, testimony, closings. Then I wonder if they've already agreed to move the trial to a different venue. I mean, think about it. Jury selection in Moscow, Idaho, they would have to have probably questionnaires filled out by the jurors. I mean, Moscow is not a big place. Latah County, let's look at the population for Latah County. I'm looking up the population on my laptop really fast. Okay. 2021, the population of Latah County was 40,313. So that's very small. Now think about the people who are eligible for jury service. People who have driver's licenses that are adults, 18 years old, and registered voters. I'm assuming that's how they do it in Idaho. So that brings that number down of potential jurors even more. So 40,000, let's think about that. That's residents. That's not including the college kids because they're not residents. They're part of the year going to school unless they live there. So they're going to have to move this thing if they think it's going to be a 6-week trial. There's no way that they could do jury selection in Moscow, get a fair and impartial jury, in my opinion. That would take probably a couple of weeks, if not longer. Plus, if it is a death penalty case, the jury will have to be death qualified, which adds another layer to jury selection. And then you're talking more like 9 weeks, probably, maybe even 10 for that trial. So I don't know. We'll see. This is me all just kind of talking from covering these things in the past. Rob, it could be Ada County. I mean, like, Ada County is probably thinking, if say they do move it to Ada County, I'm thinking they'll be like, okay, can we just not be the host city for trials anymore? Maybe they don't care, but... Okay, A. Heineman asks, what about Wagner jury in Pike County? Okay, so I'm going to explain to you what happened in Pike County for the Wagner jury, for George. George Wagner's trial was ridiculously long. I think that it was probably, if I recall, somebody said it was maybe one of the longest trials, if not the longest trial in Ohio history. Jury selection for George Wagner's trial in Pike County started last year on July 5th. That started when the potential jurors were summoned to a building to fill out questionnaires. They fill out their questionnaires there, right? Then in August, I think it was August, I would have to look it up, but I think it was early August. I went out there for the first day of jury selection, and they were doing the death qualified jurors because it was a death penalty case. And so they had to basically question prospective jurors to see if they could impose the death penalty should it be required. So that added that other layer to jury selection. So they brought these jurors in one by one, and they wanted a pool of so many of these death qualified jurors so that then they could whittle it down and pick the final panel, which included alternates. So they bring in these jurors one by one, one by one. They're asking about the death penalty. They're asking them all these questions. And it took weeks for them to do that. Then they got to the final jury selection process where they put them all in the box and question them in a group. And then they strike some, they remove some for cause, what have you. Then on August 28th, they had finally gotten the jury. August 28th, we go on the jury view, which took, if I recall correctly, 2 or 3 days, where we're following the school bus around. They loaded these jurors into a school bus and literally took them on the route the Wagners took that night when they committed the homicides, the route that Jake told them they took, driving literally all over Creation all night long, back and forth and back down in these country roads and stuff like that. So if you take that into consideration, August 28th, we did the jury view. The process started on July 5th with the filling out of the questionnaires. I mean, that took weeks. And then opening statements were delayed because one of the attorneys got sick and had to go to the hospital. So that delayed the trial a week. And then it went into almost Thanksgiving. So that was insane. All right. Annie asks, oh, yes. Pike County had 27,000 people, so that was an even smaller pool. And it took forever for them to select that jury. And George Wagner, they would tell you basically that wasn't a fair jury. They would literally tell you that. They will tell you they don't believe it was a fair and impartial jury. Annie Ruler asks, Judge, here comes the judge. Hope we get to the bottom of this slaying. Oh, okay. Sorry, I was just reading that. Not every juror, A. Heinemann, but when I was there for jury selection, and I wasn't there the entire time, but some people would say, oh yeah, one of the, so-and-so Roden is my cousin or my mom's sisters, my grandma's sisters, whatever. I mean, everybody was related. And some of the people knew the Wagners, some knew the Rodens. And that's just kind of the way it was. Like, it's a small community. So those people were, stricken, removed for cause, because you can't just have people who are related to people serving on a jury. So, that was a hard one to select a jury. But keep in mind, A. Heinemann, this is a very fresh homicide. Like, this is still fresh. It's less than a year. When that jury was selected in Pike County, it had been it had been 6 years. It had been 6 years since the homicides. So you had that 6-year time span. 6 years after the homicides, 6.5, 6 years in a matter of months, the trial started. So you also had that amount of time for things to kind of dissipate. And really, in that case, there were very few leaks. It was pretty impressive how few leaks there were in that case. So you had publicity surrounding that case where they're trying to solve the crime and they're trying to get information, and then, they start focusing on the Wagners. And that investigation went on for 2.5 years before an arrest. We knew the Wagners were the prime suspects a year after the homicides occurred because they were searching their properties. We heard from family members of the Rodens that there was this bad blood over the custody of the child. But still, you had that passage of time. Oh, that's interesting. So Cindy, who lives in the area, she says, you would be surprised by how many local folks do not follow the story. That's amazing to me because this is what I said earlier. Yes, not everybody follows the news. Not everybody is watching, stuff on social media. People have lives. But this was this coverage of this case was worldwide. But it still wouldn't surprise me if some people locally didn't follow it. So, good point. Let's see. Annie Ruler. I feel the jury really, really needs to see the house, hear the noise, and decide what they think was heard. I agree with you. I think they should do a jury view, and I'm thinking that's part of the reason they didn't demolish the house. But, we're a long way away from that. So, guys, yeah, I have to get up early in the morning, but I really wanted to come on here and talk with you, and I hope to do this more. I said this last night that I used to do Facebook Lives a lot when I worked in local news, and I loved doing them so I could talk to everybody. But I don't know, I just got out of the habit of doing them. I mean, the job I have now, I start in the morning and I kind of just keep working all day long. Maybe I don't have time or what have you. But I think YouTube's kind of cool because it seems like a lot more people are watching on YouTube and stuff. So I think that would be a cool place to talk to people. And I'll see what I can do about bringing you some more info. I'll look around and see what I can find out. But I'm going to log off. I need to get some dinner. I need to get this, what makeup is left on my face, off and get ready for bed because I have an early flight. So maybe I'll be back here, I don't know, in a month or two. We'll see. So sorry if I was a little too rambly. I'm a little tired, but hey, we'll talk another time. All right, guys. See you later. Have a good night. And please, please be safe. Oh, and if you have any feedback for me, you have any questions, leave it in the chat. If there's anything you want to talk about another time, feel free to DM me. We can talk about just about anything. I can talk about just about anything. So yeah, it would be great to chat another time, and we'll come up with all kinds of fun topics. And I can also talk about health and medical stuff too. So I want all of you guys to be healthy. So talk soon, guys. Have a good night.